Welcome back to the Overlap in Focus, and in this part we're going to be looking at ownership of football clubs and starting with the big story at the moment at Manchester United. So Laurie, what is going on?
Yes, lots is going on, Jamie. Clearly the Glazers have put the club up for sale as part of their look at strategic investment opportunities, and I think everyone had the perception that it would be sold. They had two bids come in on the deadline, one from Shay Given, who is connected to the Qatari estate, one from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who owns Ineos, and he was going to do it through that company. And as the days have gone on since that point, when I think it felt like it was, coming to a crucial moment, the idea is that the Glazers, or specifically Joel and Avram, their reluctance to sell that was always there, I think, has kind of become more of an issue. And we've seen the share price drop, which I think is an indication that investors are looking at that situation thinking, actually, the money that we put in previously, is it going to be realised to the extent that we thought it was going to be? Because I think the bids that have been coming in from Shay Given and Sir Jim Ratcliffe aren't quite at the level that the Glazers, Joel and Avram, would want. So at the moment, we're still waiting on them coming back to the bids and sort of that potential negotiation practice coming in. And obviously in the background, or not in the background, rather in the foreground, you had Avram Glazer turn up at Wembley, his first visit for a Manchester United match live since the opening day of the season, which was at home to Brighton. Before that, it was the Newcastle game when Ronaldo made his second debut. So these are infrequent visits, and it was really intriguing to see him position himself at this game, with an idea that he is still in some way emotionally invested in Manchester United. What will investors, what will Shay Given and Sir Jim Ratcliffe make of that?
Gary, the market value, I just want to ask you a question on that, has dropped 1.2 billion in the last week. I mean, that's on the back of people fearing maybe that the Glazers are going to stay. How fearful are you Manchester United fans about that right now?
I think Manchester United fans are hugely fearful, and I think, to be fair, if anybody was listening on Sunday, there were huge renditions of We Want Glazers out first half and second half. I think it's absolutely not in doubt that Manchester United fans want a change of ownership. I started to doubt it last week when they put the ticket prices up, and I know I got a lot of replies, and I read a lot of the replies from Manchester United fans saying, well, they're running the business as usual and they've got to think about FFP, which is a fair play. There has got to be increasing revenues to be able to make sure that Manchester United can invest more in players next season. But I just thought, if you're in the middle of a sale process, they've just appointed a director of operations, which is a senior position within the club. I thought that was a little bit strange, because I thought, well, surely they'd wait and see whether if the sale's going to go through in the next month or two, let them sort of deal with that. Then you're putting up the prices for next season, taking criticism that actually you're not going to even benefit from because they'll have sold the club by then. And this idea that putting the prices up will mean that Jim Ratcliffe or the Qataris or other US consortiums will pay more money is rubbish. They're already paying triple and quadruple the value that obviously the club is. I am concerned because Laurie, hear the sort of, if you like, the rumours around that Joel and Avi, two of the brothers, don't want to sell. There are other family members that do, and one of the routes that we were hearing pre-Christmas was that they were going to stay in and they were going to try and find. You mentioned two words before, Laurie, and I know you've got your ear to the ground. They're probably a lot closer than I have. Strategic investment, which is something that FSG are mentioning at Liverpool. That means that ultimately you buy part of the family out, you leave Joel and Avi in, but what Joel and Avi will retain as part of that strategic investment is running and control of the club. That's a nightmare scenario. I would advise any investor who's coming in to take out a minority and leave Joel and Avi, and they're going to be very unpopular people and their brand will be damaged enormously because the fans are not going to accept it.
Are you too happy with Qatari ownership of Manchester United?
Personally, I don't want any state to own Manchester United. I don't believe we should, any club, whether it's a Western state, Middle Eastern state, whatever, I don't think any state should own Manchester United.
So you'd rather the Glazers stay than the Qataris come in?
I'd still want the Glazers to leave.
But what would you prefer?
It's a hard question because on one hand you've got people that are taking $1.5 billion out over a course of 15 years, and on the other hand you'd have people that are putting it in. But I just never want to be linked to a state. You're then thrown into the mix with anything that state does, good or bad. But I'm realistic enough to know that my opinion meant very little when the Glazers took over, and my opinion means very little now. Ultimately, the club's going to be sold if it's sold to the highest bidder, and I'm eternally an optimist, so I'm kind of looking at this like, is this the Glazers kind of, you know, manipulating the negotiations and trying to crank more money up out of these people? Because it's clear the Qataris want United, it's clear Ineos want United, but they're creating a negotiating point.
If they don't sell now, it'll be carnage.
It will.
I can't imagine. We've seen the protests over the last 15 years, 18 years since they took over. What we saw last season before the Liverpool game. If they go this far and tease us into thinking we're going to sell and all of a sudden, actually, we're staying, I don't think it is worth it for them at this point.
I think it'll be a
Just
mess.
now pull out
You
of this
just
sale
mentioned
process.
that you weren't happy with Qatari ownership. Is that a minority
It's
feel
not
at Manchester
Qatari
United?
ownership I'm not happy
Or
with.
no, state ownership?
I don't care what nationality
Okay,
they are.
state ownership. But do you feel you're in a minority with Manchester United fans, or is that a groundswell of opinion?
I think you have two kind of divisions of fan base at the moment, and I think most clubs will. You have kind of like the online fan base where they're very vocal, and a lot of people don't care. They just want Mbappe and they want a new stadium and they want all these kind of things. And I kind of get it. Like if you're asking football fans to be, you know, to comment on all these kind of political things, it's difficult. Most people just want to go and watch their football team on a Saturday or Sunday. I kind of get that, but I think a lot of fans within the ground would be a little bit apprehensive towards state ownership and
But
Qatar
it would be nothing like when the Glazers came in here in the
I
green
doubt-
and gold
no, no, no.
campaign.
I
nothing
don't
like
think
that.
you'd see the same sort of backlash.
I think the relief of them leaving will kind
Yeah.
of probably be above and beyond anything else.
Is that something you want to bring the Newcastle fans in? You're obviously in that situation now, but what the lads have just mentioned there was that relief that Mike Ashley had gone. Almost in some ways makes you forget about what your ownership is about, where it's from.
Absolutely, yeah. Because for us, it was the release of Mike Ashley, the release of no hope and no ambition was so great. Other than whoever was coming in. And listen, I didn't choose Mike Ashley being charged. Didn't choose Saudi Arabia to come in. In an ideal world, we'd go back to the 90s when Shay Given was there and Freddie Shepherd, a local businessman, local fan, owned Newcastle and had the money injected. Now there's no way we can do that and compete at the top end of the Premier League without allowing the likes of a stake come in, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, the things they're doing for our club and our city, as a fan, like Adam says, that's all we look for.
The
Try
thing
and
from
win
a
games.
United perspective is like, we don't need that. Do you know what I mean? We've literally pumped $1.5 billion into that family. Imagine that was put into the. We don't need that kind of sugar daddy to be pushing all the money into the club.
I think that has
something
been
that
the
we need.
conversation around it as well. The
Yeah.
Glazers' ownership has, as you've touched on there, it's changed what United fans expect or think is necessary for United to be successful. As Adam said, 1.5 billion through having the Glazers as owners. Like, that would be a new stadium, no problem.
Laurie, can we just go back to the bids? Because the two bids were made public were obviously Ineos and the Qatari bid. I can't believe that there aren't US consortiums have come in. And is it right that the banking broker that's dealing with it, Rain, have had to warn the two bidders that have made their bids public to stay silent because it's confidential? And there actually probably are other US consortiums or US bids that are behind it, or other bids from around the world. That there can't just be two bids for Manchester United.
I mean, that's what we're told.
There's just two bids.
We've asked that question, and we think, maybe people are keeping their cards very close to their chest. And as we touched on before the Leicester game, is there a benefit to staying silent for the time being? Because at the moment, all the focus is on, Sheikh Jassim and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and actually, there's a value to being kind of, doing your work quietly. But yeah, I think the price. You look at, the FT came out with a piece on Sunday which valued the club at $1.6 billion, which I think is on a pure business term. So it's like, profit and loss. Clearly the club is worth more than that, but 6-7 billion, there's only a small pool of people that can afford that.
And I think it's a fair point. I think fans and football has lost the fight, and the horse has bolted when it comes to who owns your football club now in the Premier League.
Obviously,
it's got
these two think that you're obviously worried about the fact of state ownership. That doesn't bother you.
No, I've gone through 3 stages in my sort of Glazer sort of era at Manchester United. The first one was, to be fair,
You were all right when they were paying you.
No, the first was when I was a player in my 20s, when I didn't understand, to be fair, a lot about finance and business. And to be fair, we were all under the very watchful eye of Sir Alex Ferguson, and you didn't complain about ownership, you didn't complain about anything other than playing football. Not one employee in the club, all 500 of us, we got on with our jobs, that's what you did. And I was in my 20s, it's not an excuse, it's just a fact of where I was in my life. Then I left Manchester United, I did an ambassadorial role with them for about 3 or 4 months. I didn't particularly like it that much, to be fair. And I started to understand a lot more about business. I saw that ultimately Sir Alex Ferguson had underpinned that, obviously as the football project started to fail, underpinned that sort of, if you like, ownership and sort of kept them, if you like, afloat for the previous 8 to 10 years. The last 7 or 8 years, it was when the Super League, I mean, the dividends, the debt, the lack of investment in the ground. I remember looking from my hotel over at the ground one day and thinking, and I remember saying it, the stadium's rusty, and it actually was rusty. Literally the paint around the stadium was rusty, and I thought, that can't be right. You wouldn't do that to your own house. So I thought, they're not investing in the stadium. The stadium, to be fair, was travelling around the ground, seeing Tottenham, Arsenal, all these other brilliant stadiums that were emerging in Europe as well, the Allianz Arena, all these brilliant things that were happening in different countries. Lack of investment in the regeneration, the community, everything was, and I thought, they're failing at football, they're failing in the non-football side, and then the Super League came where they, to be fair, turned not only on their own stadium and their own fans, they actually turned on the whole of the rest of football as well and try and sell out. That was it, and I went then into my third phase, which was, to be fair, when I started speaking up publicly. Previous in that second phase, though, my stance was when United fans would have a go at me, and a lot of United fans had a go at me in that period, I would say, who is the alternative buyer? It's going to be Russia, it's going to be China, it's going to be the Middle East. They're your buyers for this football club, or it's going to be another US family or fund similar to the Glazers, which is leveraged buyout and borrowing and private equity. Which one do you want? And no Manchester United, just like Adam's not been able to find the answer to that question, it's difficult.
There's no perfect answer.
Do you know who Sidney
Smith
Smith is?
Pardon?
Do you know of Sidney Smith?
No, I don't.
Right,
No.
he's a English philosopher, political writer from the 1800s. He said, the worst thing you can do in a situation where you can only do a little bit is to do nothing. And we talk about how the horse has bolted or how we've reached this point of absolutely no return and whatnot. I don't think that's true. And Adam says he's an optimist. And the point of optimism isn't to say, oh, you know, the glass over there is half empty. The point is there to go, we could probably change what vessel that is to think of better ways we can live our lives and then to go and chase them. And we've seen it multiple times where football fans, when they do group together and they do go, actually, we're not going to do this, football fans can change things. The Super League and the failing of the Super League was football fans all going, no, no. And the only, you know, all the people that jumped in, the Dirty Dozen.
But the Manchester United fans haven't been able to do that with the Glazers.
They've tried. And
Well,
that's
they've
the
tried,
thing.
but they haven't been able to do it.
But they've tried, and they've kept trying, and they've kept trying. And again, there's that old...
No, but Carl, my point is that who do you want? Who do you? I'll ask you the question. Right, you're a United fan.
Who do I want?
Who do you want?
I
No. Who do you want? The Glazer family to own the club? Do you want a Chinese ownership, Russian ownership, or Middle Eastern ownership?
I rebuke all of these, because I genuinely think... I rebuke.
There is no other option though.
They are. There always is.
No, but Carl,
There always is.
you're living in a dream world, Carl. You really are.
Gary,
Who's got £5 billion?
Gary,
No businessman or woman in this country has got. You need about 25, 30 billion.
You need 4 billion. You need 4 billion to start this conversation.
No, you don't. No, you don't. That's naivety. You don't put your whole cash pot into a football club.
Of course.
Because your business, you've got to be worth 25 billion, 30 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion to afford 5 billion just for a football club, which is a bit of a play toy, really,
Of
for
course,
them.
we're seeing this with
So
Jim Ratcliffe's bid.
Who's got in this country, no, but even Jim Ratcliffe can only buy 69%. He's got debt still on the club. Even he's stretching himself, and he's the richest man in the country. Yeah. Who in this country can afford to buy Manchester United and do what you say? No, honestly, no one can afford it. The only thing that we can rely upon is the controls that are put in place to control owners. We can't control who sells one private business to another.
That's the only thing you can rely on. I think
giving control to the government over football is
the
way.
Do you think you can control?
What you should rely upon is yourself and other people, community, right? And
Carl, do you think that do you honestly believe you can control the Glazer selling process in the next 2 months? Have any impact on it whatsoever?
No.
Right,
but
okay, I feel the same.
That should never stop you from saying what you believe in, and if you disagree with something. That shouldn't, again, just because you're going to do a little bit doesn't mean you should do nothing. So when you ask me a question like this, if I rebuke that reality that you're trying to give me, I should be allowed to rebuke that reality.
I will say,
if I believe Manchester United,
I'll say quite openly, I wish every football club in this country was owned by local business people or fans. I wish that was the absolute case. I'll say it.
Then we'll keep doing it.
Right.
I believe
we
that
can't do it.
It'll never
Yes, you can.
You are
Why would you
dreamland.
do this for 3 years if you don't believe it can be done?
Do what for 3 years?
Why would you talk about independent regulators if you don't believe it can be done?
Right,
Why would you say all the things you say?
Let's take one step at a time.
If you don't believe it can be done.
What's achievable? We can potentially affect and impact the governance of football, which means it puts controls and sustainability measures and keeps us as a competitive pyramid, right, through an independent regulator who's got the best interests of the game at heart. Then let's get that put in place first. If that then happens, it could then be that the independent regulator that says every football club has to have an element of fan ownership, maybe 15-20% to start with, and every owner has to put up a seat on the board and 15-20% of their value of their club. It may be that it couldn't be afforded by a lot of fans, but at least you could put it up. But that's 5-10...
So you do believe in a better world?
I do, but how am I going to
So
get
why are you
there?
telling me not to accept? Why are you telling me about that's reality,
No, but
about
what
a
you're-
worse
No,
world?
but I've got a plan to get there. What I'm saying is what you're saying at this moment in time is that you feel like you can impact the next 2 months. You can't. It's going to end up in the hands of people who pay the most money.
But there's no reason why we shouldn't be against. Like, it doesn't mean we just go.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's cool
Manchester
then."
United
Yeah,
are
but
big enough
he's
to be
not
fan
saying,
on.
he's not
But
saying
we
that
should
you
still
can't
be
say that
against
you're not against it. You can say as much as you want, but in retrospect, it's not going to affect much because.
Of course not. I'm still.
As you said,
The key word is much.
It's not
And the
going to.
Glazers-
It's
It
not
can affect
gonna,
a little, and therefore you should do
It's
what
not
you
going
can.
to affect much because if the Glazers want to sell, they'll sell. That is the bottom. That is the very bottom line. If they don't, they
But
don't.
Ultimately,
it's not
we should
really
always
gonna
have an
affect
opinion.
much.
And I think one of these things that stuck, funny enough, from your book is like about when you first went to football, and it's like I don't care who's in the director's box, who's in the manager's box, who's even in the shirts. I'm just there to be a football fan and support this club. And ultimately, our clubs have got us by the balls, and all these guys know that. It's like
Do you think that
we're still going to
changes
come.
with Man United and state ownership then? Do you think that fan element and the whatever happens if we are owned by Sheikh Yassim, who's got links to the Qatari state, you know, where his money's coming from, and then United have success and they spend a lot of money, does that change your enjoyment of that? Because for me, growing up, Sir Alex Ferguson, it felt organic. I know United spent money in transfer windows, but it felt like there was hard work there, and then it.
Laurie, do you think Manchester United and Liverpool, I'll say that, as seen as the two sort of maybe biggest clubs in the country and haven't gone down that road as of yet? Do you think it is different and those two clubs are treated differently and should be treated differently in the eyes of what you're talking about?
I mean, it should be the same for all clubs, right? I mean, Newcastle have got an incredible fan base. We saw that at Wembley on Sunday. I do think there's a difference from what the fans would want because when Abu Dhabi took over Man City, they hadn't won the league for several years. So it was almost like this is our opportunity to punch.
And the same with Newcastle.
And same with Newcastle.
Exactly, yeah.
With United, it's different because they should, as Adam said, be able to compete on their own merit. They've got so many fans all over the world, and they make enough revenue to compete. And I mean, that touches on a little bit, I think, what Carl is getting at and what you would obviously like, ultimately, some kind of fan ownership. And they looked at this back in 2010, the Red Knights, I mean, it was difficult because, you've got the idea was that you'd have sort of 17, 18 very wealthy people, each putting in, 20, 30 million, and you could come together. But that was too tough for them. They couldn't do it. And they looked for an anchor investment as well.
To that, I think, because he's someone that
Possibly,
at least reportedly was a Man United fan as a child, is from the local area-ish. So if you're talking about fan ownership, like you said, you can get 17, 18 people, and that's not really fan ownership in terms of everyone who's a fan
But
gets
even
a
then,
piece.
you hear about the debt and stuff, and I know.
Well, that's true, yeah.
Billion-dollar businesses work on different levels to what I know, but when I hear about that debt, I just think.
Well, that's what
here we
puts,
go
that's
again.
what has put fans off Sir Jim Ratcliffe because the Glazers have now made debt such a toxic issue. Rightly so, the fact that they've just left it there on the club from their leverage buyout, which should never have been allowed to happen. But it's like anyone that is coming at this with debt is instantly discounted. How many companies like this are taken over without debt? It's a rarity.
Carl, you said you'd rebuke it if they come in, but I mean, how far would you go with that? If you're a Manchester United fan, would you say, I can't enjoy this success that comes? I know you've got to go to the game for your job, but how far would you go with it?
It's different when you do it professionally, but yeah, I would feel differently about Manchester United based on who comes in because be it state-owned.
Would you not be able to enjoy the success that come on the back of it?
I think it puts, and forgive me, Newcastle fan, I think it puts a asterisk on things. Right?
But hold on. The reason I disagree with that is I knew the Glazers were wrong. I protested the Glazer ownership. When I saw Gary Neville lifting trophies after that, I was
the
still
different-
buzzing about
the
it. Do you
thing
know what I
is
mean?
though,
I was still.
Well, I
It's
suppose
always
you've got
better
the-
because
you've got
we won
the-
stuff in spite of the Glazers. So you can really celebrate that. When you look at Man City's titles over the last 10 years, every single one of them, every single City fan, every single football fan knows they wouldn't be doing any of this if it weren't for their big
you
boy
can't say that
owners.
about United.
You can't say that about
fans
United.
have
We've
literally-
only won 2 League Cups and an FA Cup in the last 10 years. But all of those were won despite the terrible job the owners are doing, not because they've got infinite money.
No, but the
from-
point is, I think with the new owners, would you think
part of me
this
would
means
think,
less?
No,
It
you
doesn't
wouldn't.
mean less to be.
Honestly, I hate people
There's
sitting there
gonna
saying,
be-
"Oh,
Hang on,
I'm
hang on,
going to
let's
think."
touch the Newcastle
I'm going to
view
think if we're lifting at the Champions League, I'm going to be thinking, "Oh,
Another?
I can't believe these owners." Honestly, I promise on my life, you will not care. Like literally 99% of fans will not care if the club is successful, if you're buying players every transfer window, spending loads of money. The majority of football fans, and it's not their fault because I don't, as I've said before on this before when you've asked me about the ownership, I don't think that your average football fan should be a political vessel for ownership issues that they don't understand. But it just in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to.
If Eddie Howe lifts the Premier League in 5 years,
There's not going to be asterisks for me. There'll be
man,
no
that was Saudi
asterisks for
money,
me.
I got that.
If I
Should
see
we celebrate now?
Jamal Lascelles if the Premier League come, I'm not.
But
thing that
is
wouldn't
the
be asterisks for me, I wouldn't like
is
is
the
the sports watching.
desperation for Newcastle to win a trophy?
It is very different.
Does that make it different, do you feel, to Manchester United because of the situation you find themselves in? The situation Manchester City found themselves always in your shadow, not winning trophies. Is it different? That's why I mentioned Liverpool and Manchester United. Does that make it
win
different?
leagues without a Qatari owner or without a state owner.
Whereas we
without all
need that
money.
help because
Yeah,
we
yeah.
don't generate that revenue.
Shay, you were at City when the Abu Dhabi ownership came in. How did you feel at the time? And what I mean, I remember there being a little bit of noise, but there wasn't massive noise because obviously you'd come out of Tino Archer, or was he?
Yes.
Yes, at Tino Archer. Your dad obviously
I'm
difficult
Thailand,
ownership
sorry.
before that, obviously as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's financial fair play as well. Whenever the Abu Dhabi people come into Manchester City, so it was different. You know, we talk about Dan Ashworth in Newcastle. He says got the financial fair play's come down heavy on all the top clubs. Was it different? Did it feel different? Not really. As a player, no. You know, again, you were crossing the white line. You're focused on winning the games, trying to get up the league, trying to compete at the top table. But you look at Man United and Liverpool, for example. I know I'm stocked against here, but they've spent hundreds and hundreds of million over the last 10 years. I know City's getting a bit of stick recently, and they have to prove their innocence. Of course they do, because there's so many accusations against them, and I'm sure they'll prove that. But time will tell. But at the same time, on the flip side, Man United, Liverpool have spent massive amount of money as well on their squads as well. And you can say, yeah, the fan base around the world maybe is bigger than a Manchester City fan base. I don't know. I don't. You guys are more clever than me with the financial fair play thing. I don't really get my head around it. I thought it was brought in to protect clubs like a Leeds going to the wall, or one as a Derby as a coach. The owner that was going to. It was to do that, and I don't see the fault in the money going through the football pyramid, or whatever you want to call it. If Liverpool buy a player, or Man United, or Newcastle, then it filters through the game. I thought it was brought in to protect the clubs from going to the wall, and that's my understanding. But then, as you say, if the Qataris come in and buy Man United and blow all the other people away, then I know there's not a fair.
No,
there's not a fair run.
There has to be a cost control put on
Yeah.
clubs, because then you would get a disparity, and it would then take away its competitive edge. That's where I think the game needs proper regulation, sustainability measures, real-time financial monitoring. Clubs should be allowed to invest to get up to the level of the top clubs. So Newcastle's owners, Brighton's owners should be able to invest up to the level so they can compete with Manchester United, with Arsenal, with Liverpool, with Manchester City, all the top revenue clubs. But you're right, I wouldn't feel right if all of a sudden we had an ownership that came in and we were spending £1 billion every transfer market, or 800 million every transfer market, signing 5 best players in the world, and we're winning the league every year. I wouldn't feel that's not right. That's not protecting the pyramid. That's destroying English football. So we do need cost controls in place. I just want to throw a question to you on ownership. And I said this to you before. I personally feel like you've got to watch what's going on at Liverpool, because it's a little bit sort of, they were selling, but now they're not selling. Are Liverpool fans a little bit worried about FSG? And there seems to be a little bit of noise. There seems to be a little bit of noise about them at the moment.
I don't think Liverpool were ever selling. I think
they said they were selling, didn't they?
I know, but when you actually look, I mean, listen, when people speak to the people right at the top, I don't think the idea was to sell. It was, if someone makes us a stupid offer, something, blow us out the water, we'd probably sell. Probably something that you might do with your house. If someone offers, ridiculous amount of money, you'd sell. But I think they basically needed money for the summer, because Jurgen Klopp's going to have to spend 250, 300 million in the summer, and that's why they're looking for people to come in with the money. But it is a worry for Liverpool if Qatar ownership or state ownership comes into Manchester United. You have Newcastle, you have Chelsea right now, and Liverpool will be fearing that they will fall behind. But what Liverpool have always done with this ownership, and that's why I'm never critical of them, I always think, in an ideal world, you're Manchester City, where you've got great expertise and massive money. Manchester United have had huge money, no expertise. Liverpool have almost been the opposite, where they've had great expertise and not the revenues. And I always think I'd rather have the expertise than the huge revenues without the expertise. And I look at sort of Everton's situation compared to a Brighton. Liverpool over the last, say, 5 or 6 years compared to Manchester United. But in an ideal world, would I want owners at Liverpool who've got the money of United or Chelsea or Man City and their expertise? That's when no one can get near. So what Liverpool ownership have done is what they said they would do from day one, where they haven't taken money out the club, everything that's earned or brought in, and now it's a monster in terms of the money that they bring in, goes right back into the club.
I'm surprised you feel as calm as you do about the fact that they said they were selling, and then literally within 2 or 3 months they say now they're not selling.
That story went everywhere, and then when people went to the top, it wasn't a case of we are selling. No one ever came out and said we are selling. They were 100% looking
Laurie, what's the decision on Liverpool?
They always wanted investment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's very similarly linked to United, isn't it? Because the idea was that Liverpool came out and said, okay, sale or another round of investment of some variety, and the Glazers thought, we need to get on this because we're sort of looking that direction. We can't have Liverpool out there as the only club that are publicising this. Some people looked at what the Glazers did and thought that was actually desperate to kind of make it so public. But yeah, I mean, I think we are seeing that actually for all that happened with Chelsea, where I think the owners looked at that and thought, wow, we can get a lot of money here. That was a very specific situation that I think people are looking back at that thinking, did they overpay there?
So the last time I was here was after United beat Arsenal, and you, Gary, were talking about the infrastructure that the Glazers had to pay for, and you said you didn't think the fans would go for that and that something was going to happen. And now we're several months later, and the thing that happened was Manchester United may or may not be up for sale. And the thing I said then was you should never discount the most ridiculous or unexpected thing from happening. It's the punch that you don't see that's the one that knocks you out. And the Elliott Group are quiet they want to be quiet, but I think you're correct in saying they should always be worth looking at every now and again.
Well, listen, a fascinating discussion about club ownership that I'm sure will rumble on for the next few months, but unfortunately that is all we've got time for.
I hope you've enjoyed our first overlap in focus at the Shot Bar. We've really enjoyed it, and thank you to our partners at Sky Bet, and I hope you can join us next time. Please subscribe.